Okay, time for some notes. Actually, time to just listen to some notes. I'm using this page from your toolkit just to kind of do an explanation today. There's nothing really that you're going to write down, although if you want to find this page, you can highlight it. But that's about it. So you could just follow along on here. The topic yesterday and today about sampling populations, it's there's not a lot of work that we need to do with this. It's just kind of something we need to know or be aware of. So I thought I'd just kind of give some old style explanation notes, and that's probably about it. So this first part is just talking about the kind of samples you can take. What this means is when we want to collect data, which is just information from a group of people, like a survey, it's about how you collect that because you can't ask every single person. Usually that's too many. Like if we wanted to survey our school, that's like almost 1,200 people. That's a lot of people to ask. So we pick some kind of sample. So they've got these four sample types here. A representative sample, a convenient sample, a cluster sample, and a voluntary response sample. And I'm just going to give you a quick explanation of what they are. A representative sample is when you try and pick a smaller group that represents the group that you're trying to survey. So if we're trying to survey people who play sports, we would kind of randomly pick people from a couple different sports teams. If we want to sample 8th grades only, then we would only survey 8th graders because 7th graders don't represent the sample. So you can read through the explanation there, but it says the population that matches the general characteristics of the entire population. So you try and pick, your survey group from a group that matches the characteristics that you're trying to survey. It makes sense. A convenient sample is just doing it the easiest way possible. Easy is the key, which sounds good, but a lot of times a convenient sample doesn't represent the group that you're trying to actually survey, right? So a convenience sample is easy but not always accurate. That's the problem. A cluster sample means you're sampling people who have a common characteristic, but sometimes it doesn't, again, represent the population that we're trying to sample. For example, if you were doing a survey and you're like, okay, I'll ask my homeroom class. Well, if the population you were trying to survey was people who do after school sports, maybe nobody in your homeroom does after school sports. And so that cluster, right, didn't really represent the group that you were trying to find out about. A voluntary response sample means you ask your survey questions to the people who volunteer to do it. They do this kind of stuff. Sometimes they mail things to your house and say, answer this survey, or they'll send you an email. The problem is, again, volunteer, people who volunteer, that doesn't necessarily represent the entire group. So it's not the best representation of a group. It's just the people who happen to be willing to answer the question. So as far as the types of samples, a representative sample, change the color here, is the best way to go, meaning you kind of purposely try and pick and represent a smaller group that represents the bigger group that you're trying to survey. Okay, I'm going to pause here.